morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have another session on incubation opportunities with respect to sustainability and inclusivity. So before delaying further, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists on stage. So our first panelist is Shri Praveen Roy, who has been associated with DST, and he is also a head of National Science and Technology Entrepreneurship Development Board. He has worked with corporates and telecom industries for more than 7 years, and he has always been our go-to person when it comes to any queries related to TBI, and that's how we know him since so many years. And like Anita ma'am mentioned, he has been instrumental in driving various initiatives at DST. I would like to now invite our second panelist, Dr. Chhaya Chauhan, who is presently leading the Incubation Division and also EUA programs of BIRAC, under which 75 specialized biotechnology incubation centers have been established across the country. She is also responsible for national and international partnerships of BIRAC's communication team. Our third panelist is Dr. Mr. Pramit Das, who is Program Director at Atal Innovation Mission. He has worked with various corporate giants like Colgate and L'Oreal, and he is now driving the program at Atal Innovation Mission. Our fourth panelist is Mr. Shalabh Singh. He is the Principal Director at Accenture. He has been economist and author at various journals. With that, I would like to invite our moderator for the panel, Mr. Prasad Menon. He is the CEO of SIBA and Vice President at ISBA. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I think, indeed, you can imagine the word sustainability. As incubator managers, when we talk about sustainability, the first thing that comes to mind is financial and economic sustainability. Even the anchor, who is an incubation manager, even he thought sustainability is financial sustainability of the incubator, but that's not what it is. That's exactly the reason why we kept this in the agenda. So, in the interest of time, I would be requesting each of the panelists. There are two topics, inclusivity and sustainability, and these two topics, like I'm very passionate about it personally, because for me, inclusivity means that everybody gets a fair chance. And this word in India, when we say everybody should get a fair chance, it's a very heavy and very difficult task. Mr. Ramanan very aptly said that 70% of our incubators are in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Does it make it inclusive? So on the topic of inclusivity, I would just like to take probably your 60 seconds, 180 seconds on what does inclusivity mean for you when it comes to the incubation and when it comes to the startup ecosystem in the country. Yeah, I would ask first Pramit, if you can. Yeah.
Okay, I think inclusivity for me, as Prasad really pointed out, it's about giving best-in-class access and opportunity to the incubation ecosystem, irrespective of gender, your socio-economic strata that you reside in, maybe to a point in extent also do with language, because we know that even in India, 85% of the population don't even speak English as a second, third, or fourth language. So in order to make this whole incubation ecosystem more inclusive, language has to be a pillar which we need to circumvent. And finally, I think inclusivity also goes beyond, and we have to move over the geographic barrier, which is like, even when we talk about innovation ecosystem in the country, we have those clusters, right? Delhi NCR cluster, Bangalore cluster, Chennai, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Pune. What about the rest of the country? What about the tier 3 cities? What about our rural hinterland? How do you find those local solutions to the local problems? How do you get that? So moving beyond and having a community-centric approach towards innovation is something which will make our whole innovation ecosystem far more inclusive. So that's what my inclusivity stands for.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. So, in fact, if we talk about a topic, really it is very apt for the current scenario in the country, because when we say sustainability and inclusivity, I mean, anything which is not inclusive will not sustain on long term. So this is, and when we say like we are a diverse country where we have unity in diversity, naturally if we are very centralized, like the cluster of incubators, as just mentioned, like we are having incubators in some of the cities and some capitals only. So unless we spread it across the country, because anyone in tier 2 or tier 3 city, if they want to innovate, if we don't provide that kind of infrastructure for them to support that, naturally the rights are not properly met. So certainly this aspect has to be seen, and this kind of support system from the government has to be brought in place.
Yeah, a very good morning to all the audience. And it is a great pleasure to be among the incubators community. And I would like to congratulate ISBA for organizing this conference. So for me, with respect to BIRAC, the inclusivity means providing equal opportunities to, everybody. So all our calls are national calls. But that provide equal opportunity to all the startups and entrepreneurs to compete at national level. But apart from that, we also announce certain calls for certain regions, to bring them on board with the national ecosystem. For example, as somebody mentioned, that we have these certain clusters where the ecosystem has already grown, is already mature, like, for example, Bangalore, Hyderabad, especially with regards to biotech. But that doesn't mean that we do not have innovators and startups in other parts of the countries. So we've announced specialized calls for inviting applications from these regions to bring them, into the mainstream. We have one such call, which is specially announced for the northeastern part of the country, wherein we provide 50 lakhs to the entrepreneurs and startups to bring them into the mainstream. We also have created a network of pre-incubation centers, which are housed in the universities and institutes located in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, where there is no presence of incubation as of now. So that is how we are doing it.
So I guess I'll answer that question in two parts. The first one is, how do you drive inclusivity in entrepreneurship itself, right? So how do you, for example, promote women entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs from marginalized sections or from rural areas? And that's one part of the inclusivity that we need to look at. But then on the flip side, I feel that startups themselves have a big role to play in driving inclusive growth. So when I was looking at SDGs, I came across what I call the 30% problem. So if you look at, for example, urban areas, 30% of the people globally live in slums, or 30% of women are not in employment or education, or 30% of the poor suffer from extreme poverty. And so how do you build solutions for that? How do you help the market mechanism address those problems? And there are lots of startups doing that, including in India, like, there is a startup called Docternal, which is looking at AI and machine learning to identify diseases at affordable cost, or Fluxgen trying to build water solutions and so on. So I think it's both the parts.
And this is something which I would say, because see, when we talk about inclusivity, we spoke about geography, you spoke about gender, and we spoke about socioeconomic disparity. I agree that as far as startups are concerned, they look at these, how do we reach, whether it's called bottom of the pyramid, middle of the pyramid, in order to get opportunities with regards to commercial success, because you're talking about, big chunk of our population being there. But when it comes to incubators, and now this is a question that I'm going to put, because all of you have been in this, are we still centered around institutes of technology? Are we still centered around those, there are, if you draw a heat map of India and look at where these incubators are trying to emulate or attract startups from, they're probably in a concentrated. In that case, are we missing out on other areas? And I think that is because just we haven't thought of it. And what I just want to like to hear each one of you just reflect on that and give your 2 cents on this. And maybe I'll start the other way around this time.
Yeah, so we do need a broader ecosystem, right, to address things. And I believe that's where, I mean, the incubation units are important. But within that, we need a wider ecosystem play. So how do you bring together government, large private companies, academia, startups, civil society, all of them together to address that problem. And then only you could potentially solve some of these very wicked problems to solve in some ways, right? Because there are lots of challenges there. So how would each one of them contribute? The academia can bring in ideas, R&D funds, or, funded by governments probably. Then startups would prototype stuff. Businesses can help scale them up, industrialize them. Civil society can address market cracks and so on. So venture capital would need to play a role. So how do you actually energize the entire ecosystem and bring all of them together would be the key ingredient there.
Yeah, I think we need to create more awareness. So we've already, been doing that, but we need to, go into the deeper parts of the country and reach out to more people and tell them more about, these initiatives, especially of government, and, bring them into the mainstream. So that is, I think, creating more awareness would definitely help. So that would require, our incubation centers, our universities, institutes, that would help us to reach to the deeper part of the country.
Yeah, so I'll just come with the initial days, like when we started this incubation movement. As well acknowledged, like government has been supporting it, though we started with very small amount of funding, but as just now in the morning Sagar told, like it is not the amount of blessings which is required, it is the motivation to work and create a network which is really required for the country. So initially when we started with the incubator network in till 2015, the objective was to create some centers which can have this incubation support, and entrepreneurs can be supported through that. So it was not very specific on where we are creating this. It was not very planned way. Whoever deserved it, we thought like it should be there. And this has brought this kind of network where we have a lot of confidence in this. We have seen execution of different programs which are really relevant for the country during the pandemic. The program, this Govt, how it was conceived, as Dr. Anita just mentioned, like within a span of 4 days, we conceived the program. We got good support from the incubator network. Poini was instrumental in designing entire program at that time. And it was during the first lockdown when the program was just rolled out on 31st of March. The funds were disbursed. The funds were very small at that time. It was around a kitty of 47 crores. But that was not important. I mean, what was important is the strength that we were having in our network. The motivation, the cause, common cause that everyone was thinking that they can do big, they can contribute for the cause which we were facing at the time of pandemic. So we created this network, but this later on, now we can realize that this is more centralized, like it is more in the setups which were thought that was good at that time. But now if we see, as just you mentioned, Menon, like it is more, if we see the landscape of incubator network, it is more skewed and then more in the cities, and even a cluster has been formed in the cities. Today morning, I was talking to one CEO of incubator, and he was said like, we have 6 incubators in our campus. So it is more clusters in the campus now. Naturally, we have to see the demography of the country and the diversity, and if we say that there is a right to innovate, with all the innovators should have that right, and the support system should be there. So we have to reach to their doorsteps. So we have to now spread. We are in a position, we have strong muscle power with our incubators, strong intellectual power with our incubators, and really they can serve a good mentor. They can guide the new academic setups to come and form these incubators in their campuses, so that any innovator in that area, in that tier 2 or tier 3 suburban areas can be supported through this incubation movement, and they can also be brought in the main streamline. Maharashtra government with Maharashtra Innovation Council certainly has brought very good program for supporting innovation and incubation in this domain. But if we see like any innovator in maybe in Satara or Sangli, we will not expect like they should go to IIT Bombay or some major cities and then get some kind of mentoring and incubation support, especially for those startups who are in hardware and product domain. As we try to focus hardware and product startups, but we have to create infrastructure also where we can give them services, give them mentoring at the places where they are trying to operate from, instead of they migrate to the bigger cities and go for the incubation part.
Thank you. That's actually, I think the word RTI, right to innovate. I think that's a very pertinent, right? Yeah. Yes, Pramit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mirror what Praveen said just now. But this is a natural progression. If you look at the whole demand and supply, when we started off with the whole startup movement started, where was the supply coming from? These were typically from the major metropolitan cities, right? You had your best intellectual capital perhaps in those cities because of the IITs, IIMs, and other engineering colleges. So it was quite natural that we will have our first clusters or innovation centered around those places in the country. But now, are we cognizant enough that this can expand beyond those clusters? Yes, we are cognizant of that fact. And that's precisely why you will see a lot of Government of India initiatives coming up that actually targets at supporting incubation ecosystem in the tier 3 cities of the country. So I'll just take 2 minutes of your time. So one of the initiatives which we drive from NITI Aayog Atal Innovation Mission is Atal Community Innovation Centers. These are innovation centers that are blooming up in the tier 3 cities of the country. They have 2 mandates in place. One, obviously, to incubate startups, but their major chunk of work is before that. How do you identify individual innovators from the community? How do you give them the risk capital or appetite to continue on their journey for the 1 year where they are most vulnerable, where people don't take that risk? So how do you give them that risk appetite and then take them onwards through the pure process of incubation? So that is something which we are doing in order to cater to the tier 3 audience. As I said about the risk capital, we have also devised a fellowship model, which is a 12-month fellowship model that actually helps these individual innovators to learn the art and science of innovation, or the whole pathway of following the innovation journey. So that's how we are trying to get in more of a target audience from the tier 3 cities into the mainstream of innovation.
Thank you very much. I think that's indeed what you said. It's a matter of demand and supply, and it started from there. And I hope we are accelerating towards something where we will spread and make it more inclusive, not in terms of geography also, but also in terms of gender, because women representation is also not there. Even if you talk about transgender and other representation, still not there. So hopefully there are a lot of opportunities over there to focus on that. Now let me come to something, we'll talk on inclusivity, but sustainability. Now it's become a buzzword, and SDGs are common. And when you talk about corporate, everybody talks about triple bottom line. And whether it is triple bottom line for the shareholders, triple bottom line because they're forced to do it. But for startups in their initial stage of journey, they don't focus. And as incubators, are we also already getting them into the whole triple bottom line, that is people, profit, and planet? So because how can incubators themselves start this early on rather than not wait for, and I would love to hear from Idea Forge, what they do, because once you are in IPO, then you are also in the eyes and lens of the world and the public at large. But at the start of the journey, and is there an opportunity there?
Yeah, so obviously opportunity is very much there. I think this triple bottom line is something which we should maybe from incubators perspective, maybe from a startup perspective, we should focus from day one itself. I say that because of two reasons, right? So when we talk of triple bottom line, it's pretty clear. Profit, that is the whole reason we are in the business for, right? Profits. So valuation, revenue, profit, that will anyways be there. But what about sustainability? When we talk about sustainability, environmental sustainability, or for that matter, social sustainability, these are the terms which your consumers or your potential consumers are getting related to. So the brands are more admired, which are more environmentally responsible, socially conscious, and doing a bit on those lines. So you get your customers, you build your brand based on that thing. So this is one. Second, when the startups start growing at a rapid pace, when they scale up, the prudence of having a governance structure in place, a governance framework in place, helps them do that. So that helps you grow over the whole social sustainability piece. And I think Mr. Ramanan was here during the inaugural address, and he spoke precisely of this governance framework for startups, which should be concentrated on day one itself. So needless to say, these are the 2 points why a startup should concentrate on the whole sustainability piece from day one. Apart from that, I will say also the whole Gen Z people, they look at employers who are into this space, right? Who are more environmentally responsible, socially equitable, and so on. So you get to attract the best of talents if you are in this space from the day one itself.
Yeah, so with the current changing times, like where global standards are on ESGs, and we cannot keep on just thinking like the societal and environmental responsibility just lies with social enterprises and big corporates. It has to migrate to the startups. And what I feel is like when we say incubation, like we always talk of incubation, that the startups are not mature enough to go to the market directly, and they are required to be given this kind of conducive environment where they can prosper. So after that, when infant grows, the next part is the habit formation. So this habit, it can be inculcated as a habit, like the environmental concerns, the societal concerns. If we start making it as a habit for the startups also who are coming with their businesses, because they certainly are going to get a competitive advantages in their businesses, and this has to be inculcated from the beginning, starting through the incubation only.
So I think with regards to the startups, my fellow panelists have already spoken. But with regards to the sustainability of the incubation centers, if I would delve upon, so this is a very, still with so many years of, incubation centers being in existence in India and also globally. So the sustenance of the incubation centers is still, a topic which is very sensitive. So, and also even the mature centers which we'll talk about have not become, fully self-sustainable, if we'll say.
So sorry, Dr. Chhaya, to interrupt you. I think
Yeah.
this is because when we talk about sustainability,
Okay.
incubators always talk about financial sustainability,
Right.
economic. We are talking about how do we make from a sustainability of the environment, from a
Okay.
from the planet. How do you ensure that when you're building an incubator, when you're getting anything, what Mr. Roy rightly said, how do you get that habit? Because we are always talking about, how to help them with their prototyping, how to help them to access to market, how to help them get
Right.
funding, right? But as far as the planet is concerned,
Okay.
right? And I must say that, incubators, because they have this big agenda and the habit has been formed, are there opportunities for them to look at, not just from a social aspect, but
Right.
also from a business aspect? Because also, just to add, it cannot be just the social ventures who take care of the planet and everyone else, okay, it's on the profit, right?
Sure. So yes, so that will provide an added advantage, as they've already spoken, to the venture if they, market it as, and also work towards SDGs and, making it sustainable and environmentally friendly products. Yeah. So basically, I was not talking about this ventures, but about the incubator sustainability as a whole. Yeah. Right. Yeah, for the incubators. Yes, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think sustainability is not optional anymore. It has to be embedded in your business model. It's not something that you could bolt on later on. And there are various reasons why sustainability is becoming even more important now because regulations are driving it. So for example, if you look at EU, they came out with a regulation saying that for 7 products, any company operating in the EU has to ensure that they have a deforestation-free supply chain, which means that even any Indian companies supplying to those companies need to ensure that, so for example, if you're providing agriculture products, then farmers, they need to be employing regenerative agriculture and those kinds of practices. So essentially, regulation, secondly, even the investors now globally are increasingly looking at that. So are you a sustainable business model? Will you run into problems 5 years, 10 years down the line? Customers are becoming more aware, conscious. So I believe it's essential. Somewhere I feel that the boundary line between for-profit and not-for-profit is blurring. It's all about a for-benefit enterprise now. For example, if you look at a startup like Basecamp Research, they go all over the globe identifying natural proteins, and then they use their AI models to provide those starting points to R&D units in terms of new proteins and so on. And they're making money out of it, and they pump back some of that money back into preserving biodiversity. Now, do you call that a social enterprise? Do you call that a for-profit enterprise? Up to you. But that's how the world is changing. Startups are creating these new markets where none existed before. Robin Hood sort of driving inclusive trading options for youth, and then challenging established incumbents to offer those kinds of services to their customers. So I think it has to be a part of the model.
That's very interesting.
Just a small point I want to add. I think a very, very relevant point what Sir made was regarding the whole regulation piece. So having it imbibed in your DNA from day one itself, you stay ahead of the curve. Because as a startup grows, the whole changeover cost to repurpose or re-engineer your proposition to meet those regulations in terms of sustainability is a lot more. Your time, effort, and it's not worth it. If you do it from day one, you really stay ahead of the curve.
So now let me ask something, because as incubators, the metrics that we are assessed are basically, number of incubatees, graduated incubatees, funding, external funding. And as far as inclusivity is concerned, I think we also measure women-founded startups. I think that's the extent of it. So what do you think should be the metrics for incubators to measure their impact on how they are looking at both inclusivity and sustainability? Because right now, as far as social ventures are concerned, right, there's no incubator that is assessed on how many social ventures have you promoted among the incubators, right? What is the percentage? I'm just giving as an example. So what are your thoughts on that? Because we are looking at forward thinking, how can we get initiatives from incubators to promote this more and more? So maybe you can, okay, I'll start with you, Pramit, then. That's right.
Okay. Okay, in terms of metrics, let us classify it into 2 things. One is, which are the necessary conditions. So obviously, we will measure the number of women-incubated startups, or women-led startups, or women-founded startups. So that is one. But are we really limiting it to that? No, we spoke about inclusivity in different terms, right? Different focus groups, right from socioeconomic part, secondly, to even vernacular innovators part, and so on. So you have to classify them into separate groups. Not all incubator will be able to target all inclusive groups, right? All groups for inclusivity program. They should have that objective in place. What is my inclusion objective? Which are the groups that I am targeting? Am I targeting the villages around me? So that's my cluster. Am I targeting somebody who is a vernacular innovator doesn't understand English. So am I targeting that? So have those groups in place and measure number of startups incubated. So this is the fundamental thing that we do. Next, obviously, is to measure the whole success rate or the survival rate of these startups. So that will help you gauge whether compared to the normal industry average, where these separate groups lie. What is the kind of variance that you see between the industry standards and between these groups? And that can help us take those corrective action. So this is the second measure or the matrix that we need to tackle. And then there are certain sufficient conditions or sufficient metrics. These are all to do with our standard metrics that we report, which is economic indicators, right from revenue generated to funding raised. And everything should be measured against what is your industry standard. Is it lying within some tolerable limits of maybe mu minus 1 sigma kind of a level? Does the mean lie there for these groups, which is in our inclusivity target? So yeah.
If I could add on to that, what he said, we talked earlier about women entrepreneurs or promoting, say, entrepreneurs or people living with disabilities or different sorts of communities, socioeconomic background, sexual preferences, and so on. But I think a more fundamental problem is that often there is a lack of data around it. And when I say that, I mean both governments and large private organizations. And the reason I say that is when the Black Lives Matter movement sort of picked up again in the US, a lot of these large MNCs started to think about how many African Americans do we employ, how can we help them, and suddenly everyone realized that we don't have data on this. And so how do you even begin if you don't have the data that is required? So I guess a lot of this has to be, has to start at that level, that you start collecting that data and that you start reporting on those metrics as you go along.
Yeah, so I just had this in mind. So in the Northeast region, where we have supported around 7 incubation centers, we've kept a parameter that, they have to support some startups or innovators who are working on, maybe in the traditional medicines or, or orchid cultivation, such innovators. So not very deep tech science, but innovators, those who can, bring the regional challenges, who are addressing regional challenges, and also to motivate, entrepreneurs in the region. So such parameters can also be included while measuring.
Yeah, so just to mention about the data part, we try to get data for sometimes back, like how many startups are led by special category of caste. And that data was very less. I mean, we could not get, first of all the incubators could not get that data from their startups. They did not went for that kind of survey. And then whatever result came was not very encouraging. I mean, the number were very less. So this led to conceiving this kind of programs where we can go for inclusivity in terms of gender and then caste, and also for special abilities. And this was something which were missing. And we have supported some of the pilot level scale where we went for some assistive technology devices. So, I mean, these various domains can be thought of in terms of the incubators that we are having. I mean, their incubation being a key metrics criteria for their performance has been now outdated. In fact, incubation has become some kind of the way we breathe, the way our heart beats. It is by default going on at the backdrop. You are now graduated to different level of execution of programs, become professional bodies, and taking different type of incubation models. We have seen in our network, like every type of incubation models are there, and then we are going for the global incubation centers also. So this is not the major part now. Now what we can focus is like CSR is there, so we can go for ISR. So incubators, social responsibilities. So number of women startups that you can promote, number of startups of different lead founders of different caste, and startups which having persons with special abilities. If that is your output of the center, that could be some key metrics indicator for the incubator, and some reward mechanisms also should be in place so that this can be encouraged with all the incubators now.
Thank you very much. I think that's really, I think it's a very good, let's say, conclusion to this panel, because in the interest of time, I wouldn't be asking for closing remarks, but one thing, it's also the incubator's responsibility to create its metrics that include this inclusivity and sustainability agenda. We can't rely on those metrics by which we are measured on by the government, by the grant funding agency. Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And I think what you mentioned about data, definitely this is also the responsibility of the incubators, not to wait for the data being sought by the government, but to have the data from within the incubator. And so thank you very much. And I think there is, at least we put this in the conference agenda, because we have to start looking beyond what you said, how we have been thinking of incubation. Now it's like phase 2 or phase 3 of incubation in India. With this, I would have asked also audience questions, but again, in the interest of times, we have to conclude over here. Thank you very much.